Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my video this week. This week I wanted to do something a little bit different and talk to you about the issue of sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is something that we tend to think happens overseas in other countries, and what we don't realize is that it happens here in our hometowns, in our own backyards, to people that we know. So I just wanted to bring some awareness to the issue and just educate you on what sex trafficking is. Some of you know I used to work in a home for women who were victims of sex trafficking. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of my experiences there and the things that I have learned along the way. So what is sex trafficking? It's pretty much modern day slavery. After drug trafficking, sex trafficking is the second largest criminal industry around the world. It's very fast growing because, with drug trafficking, a drug deal can happen one time. With sex trafficking, you can sell the same girl over and over and over again. As of 2013, there were 27 million victims of sex trafficking, which generated $31.6 billion. So in order for someone to be considered a sex trafficking victim, there needs to be one of three things happening: force, fraud, or coercion. Force means physical or sexual abuse is taking place. Fraud means there is false promises being made between the trafficker and the victim. And coercion means that there is threats being made or intimidation of humiliation. So what that can mean is if a trafficker finds a victim, they'll gang rape her, they'll videotape it, and they'll use that as just that intimidation of if you don't do as I say, I'm going to show this to your family, I'm going to put it on the internet, things like that. So who are the traffickers? The traffickers, the term we call, are pimps. To the victims, they are considered boyfriends, or that term daddy that you might have heard before. So what these men will do is that they will convince these women that no one else cares about them, no one else loves them, no one is, there for them like these traffickers are. There is a such thing as a pimp manual, which is really, really disgusting to think about. And a quote from that book is, the pimp said, "We eat, drink, and sleep thinking of ways to trick young girls into doing what we want them to do." Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of had this idea of what a pimp looked like in my head when I started working at this place. The stories that I've heard is that these pimps can be normal, average guys. They can be younger, they can be older, they can be in their 20s, they can be in their 60s. They can be black, they can be white. There's really no stereotype for a pimp. I've also heard stories about a worship pastor who was actually pimping out his daughter, putting her in the back of his pickup truck, driving around town and pimping her out. So I really want you to stay away from some stereotypical ideas of what pimps are and what the Johns are. So going back to the pimps, the way that they get these women is a big place that they'll go is to shopping malls. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of young teenage girls walking around shopping malls by themselves with their friends, things like that. But these pimps will look for the girl who looks insecure, who's probably by herself, who's maybe looking at her feet as she's walking, and he'll go up to her and say, "Hey, you are so beautiful. Have you ever thought about modeling? You should really be a model. I actually have a modeling friend, and he can hook you up and we can get you started and you can make lots of money." And, he might give her, his contact information, and they start to build this relationship. But he's preying on her insecurities. And 90% of these women, these girls, were sexually abused as children. So they're already have that desperate need for love and acceptance. And their confidence is already very low because of that. So they start this grooming process. They start to build this trust with this girl. They'll probably start a relationship with her, and then that relationship becomes sexual. And then he'll start to buy her things after sex, take her out shopping, and he starts to equate, sex for money, money for sex. And then it becomes this, well, if you love me, you'll do this. If you love me, you'll sleep with my friends. You'll give them a blowjob. You'll service them in this way because if you love me, you'll do those things for me. But what she doesn't know is that money is being exchanged behind her back. So she's starting to get pimped out to other people. Another thing that the pimps will use is drugs, especially heroin. That's a very popular drug of choice within the trafficking circles. Because withdrawal from heroin is so, so bad, it feels like you're dying. If he can get her addicted to that, he'll use that as leverage. If I'm not going to give you, your next hit of heroin unless you go and do this for me. So now the girl feels trapped. He has the control, and, kind of starts this very bad relationship. So, trafficking can look in very many different ways. It can be in brothels, it can be street work, inside prostitution, dancers, those sketchy massage parlors that we all see, even just pornography, spas, different things like that. These things are happening. So who are the Johns? Johns is a term for the men who pay for sex. They find these women online. They call a number, set up a place to meet, things like that. So this happens a lot in truck stops, airports, kind of where there's a lot of traveling happening. And the Johns are, they're doctors, they're businessmen, they're married men, they're family men. We tend to, again, also stereotype that these Johns are, these low-life guys who just want sex. And, we kind of have this idea, but no, they're people in the church. They're young 20-some-year-old guys. They're 50-year-old men going through midlife crisis. They're, it can be anyone. So what does this mean for the girls that are going through this? So if a victim is in sex trafficking for a year and she has to service, so we'll say 5 guys a night, by the end of that year, she will have serviced 1,820 men. So that's 1,820 forced sexual encounters. So, these women are going through what we call trauma, and trauma is a threat to one's physical or mental well-being. So there is just extreme vulnerability there. There's complete loss of control. There's this feeling of chronically feeling helpless and fearful. There's profoundly disrupts, their relationships and their idea of one's belief system, and not to mention their idea of what sex is and what love really is. I met a girl who she'd never had sex face-to-face with a man before. That was something she was never allowed to do. And I just can't imagine how degrading that really feels for these women. So, I wish that I could leave you with just something hopeful and something positive. There are ways that you can get involved in sex trafficking. There's sex trafficking coalitions in every county that you can look up to be part of. The organization I worked for is Truth for Women. They have a 5K every year that you can be part of. They have a My Sister's Closet thrift store that you can donate things to and go shop at. There's lots of ways that you can be supportive of this issue. But something I want to just leave you all with is when I look at this and I think about this problem in the world, my mind goes right to sin. Like, this is a result of sin in our world, and this is Satan, and it's such a dark area of our world, but it's happening all around us. And I just want to encourage you, to just be mindful that none of us are above any sin. I know sometimes I think I would never get involved with this or that, or these people that I know would never do this because they're good Christians and they love God, and it all it takes is kind of those slip-ups and those justifications and that denial and that self-deception to just start in our hearts that kind of can lead us down this very, very dangerous path. So just be on guard, be mindful, spend time with God, pray for these women that are in these situations, pray for the men, pray for the pimps. I'm one of those people that's kind of like, well, who's helping the pimps? Like, who's helping these men? Because they're broken too. And, they have had a rough past and they need the Lord just as much as these victims do. So I hope that this was educational for you. I hope that you know a little bit more about sex trafficking than you did now, and you can just be aware of what's happening around us and not push this issue aside, because it's just going to continue to grow and grow because our world is it's full of sin and it's in need of a savior. And so I hope that this just stirs something in your heart that's just, reminds you that we need to be spreading the gospel. We need to be on the lookout and not be so inwardly focused on our own little problems because there are greater things going on out there that need our attention. So thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you guys next time.